Boys and girls, this is the Undisputed Era. Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, Roderick Strong, and you're listening to Going In Raw, baby.
Hey guys, this is Charlotte, and you're watching Going In Raw. Going In Raw. That sounds terrible.
What's up, it's your girl Sasha Banks, the legit boss, and you are watching Going In Raw. You like that?
Hey, friendos and Larson.
Also, Cal.
Thanks for joining us. Why did I sign off? That's like a sign off. Here we are. This is Going In Raw, the only pro wrestling podcast you need to be listening to. That's what Steve always says, at least. Found right here at youtube.com/Steven Larson, and anywhere fine podcasts are available. Also on the Patreon, patreon.com/Steven Larson. Got something really special today. I'm really excited about it. I've had the good fortune, the privilege of sharing this desk all week with one Cal Jack seated next to me here.
That's right.
This first week has been an absolute delight. Got another week. I'm looking forward to keep on rocking and rolling, making some great content.
Yep.
But this particular episode, I'm really excited about. We've mentioned this in the lead up to you having you on, and you've told some stories about your experience in NXT. You were part of the first class at the Performance Center.
First class to ever join the Performance Center. Mm-hmm. The last class to be at FCW, where it was in Tampa. And just that experience alone was, no one else could ever say that, because how big the Performance Center is now, how people talk about how great it is, what it was like. I was there when there's nothing in there, absolutely nothing, just a big warehouse. And being a super green guy, being super new that first 6 months, you have a different job than a lot of guys that are there. You're the first one to get sent to go put things together, help out. You have to be available no matter what. You can't say no to anything. So my experience for the most part was learning how to wrestle, and then learning to you had like a second job pretty much.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of guys, and that, I've brought up in the podcast, someone made the joke, like, he brings up guys from the loser locker room. Hey, us in the loser locker room guys, before they ever made it to that status, we were putting things together, and that was our role.
Yeah.
So, like, those 7 rings, besides the one with the foam cushions, we had to install those. And we had to put the weight room in there. Me and a bunch of guys had to put that stuff together. They didn't hire like professionals. I mean, they'd send all that stuff in. We'd help put it all together. At least we'd store it, and then we'd have some guys come in to help put it together. But yeah, we did all that. That ramp in there, all the new guys and myself included built it.
Yeah.
That comes down the little entryway that you first see in the Performance Center. Yeah, we put that together.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of more or less here just to kind of share my experience being in FCW, going from FCW to the Performance Center, what my tryout was like, who all was in my tryout that got signed, and just I'm only going to pretty much talk up until my first year and a half. And then the later part, I think most of you guys know this, but some of you don't. I got hit with a really nasty shoulder injury. Not only once, but twice, and I had to go through surgery twice, and that was pretty rough. But that aspect of it, I would recommend you guys to go on the WWE Network. Go watch Breaking Ground. That's my only thing that I can really share as far as my experience on, most credible thing on the WWE Network, and just anything that I was Cal Bishop. You can see me in my early stages. I mean, it's been it's 2019. It's almost been 4 years since then. So it's 4 years ago, long time ago. Yeah, you guys go watch Breaking Ground. Yes. I won't really talk about the injury part. That you can watch on Breaking Ground. But the lead up to it and the people I met and worked with, I'll talk about that here.
Cool.
And that's why I'm really excited to come on this show to talk about that aspect, because whenever I talk to people, they think they're like, weren't you on Breaking Ground, or mostly weren't you on Tough Enough? I'm like, no, I already made it to WWE. I'm already one of the developmental students. I don't need to be on Tough Enough. I already made it at that point. So I get confused with that a lot. And then a lot of the circumstances that ended with Breaking Ground, most people never ask me questions about it, because it was a tough show. and you're on the show to kind of convey emotion, and like you're looking at the deeper side of what it's like to be there. And it's a different experience for everybody. My experience is a lot different, but we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about Tryout, who was all at the Tryout, and then what that first year was like going from Tampa to Orlando, which isn't really that big of a move, but when you're totally changing facilities from this like little rinky-dink warehouse that's turned into a Chuck E. Cheese now into this giant like $1 million performance center. It was awesome. That experience was really, really cool.
Well, in a geographic sense, the move from Tampa to Orlando wasn't that far. It seemed in the sense of the evolution of WWE's developmental system, it was a massive step forward.
Huge change. It went from like us being like kind of how a lot of indie schools, how a lot of those promotions, how they have training centers. Yeah. Very similar to that. But even then the coaches put over how this place is better than a lot of other places, which is true. But you go from having a little warehouse with 2 rings to a giant warehouse with 7 rings, a performance, like a weightlifting center, a lounge area, 2 lockers. Coaches have their own offices, their own rooms for their offices, a promo room, a green screen room, computers to review and watch matches and to watch your own practices back. The fact that they have 2 cameras located in the building, that one camera goes all the way to Connecticut, another camera goes straight to the coaches' offices. So you're always under surveillance, and they always have an eye on you. And one little story is Xavier Woods talked about how he went to the office in Connecticut while, this is when he was in developmental. And he kind of got opportunity to walk around a little bit, and he said he like kind of glanced in Triple H's office. Triple H has a giant TV, like a giant flat screen, and on is just the Performance Center filming in the background. Wow. So he was like, Triple H is watching the entire time how that's going. So he literally has an eagle eye view on how that is for everyone and how that's going. So it was a really, it's an experience, that's for sure. But I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Exactly. Let's, for the sake of the story we're telling here, take us back to, you don't have to go into like your entirety in the history of wrestling. Yeah. But definitely, the immediately preceding your move to WWE, what were you doing? What were you winning? Who were you beating?
Who was I beating? I will say that like before I even thought pro wrestling was even a thought or a concept, I was in college wrestling. It wasn't until my sophomore year in college where I met Jerry Briscoe. And a lot of you might know this, some of you might not. Jerry is kind of the main guy who looks for the athletes, whether it's guys that are college wrestlers or some football players that want to go in a different direction, or just anyone who has, that kind of background. Jerry's the guy that will recruit, look for, and he's the main dude. He's always had a pretty good track record in finding talent in that regard. Like, for example, the guys on the main roster right now that Jerry picked out that made it, like Otis, Tucker, Dawkins, Chad Gable, Jason Jordan. As far as other notable names, like Jeff Cobb got hooked up because of Jerry Briscoe when he had his tryout, myself included. Fulton, Madman Fulton, who you guys will see on OV on Impact, and then Dak Draper, who's currently right now in Ring of Honor in that system. There's quite a few guys that Jerry was picking up, and they got opportunities to get signed or get looked at. So Jerry found me my sophomore year at the Pac-12 tournament that we have on the West Coast. I mean, if you guys are familiar with your conferences in college, you have the Pac-12, you have the Big Ten. It's probably the smaller of those conferences. So I was in the tournament. Jerry was actually looking at 2 other guys to go do a tryout. They ended up doing the tryout. They ended up not liking the concept of doing pro wrestling. When Jerry brought that to me, asking if I would ever be interested in that, I said sure. And I had a college coach that really loved pro wrestling, loved WWE, and he suggested to Jerry that it'd be something that I should try. And Jerry's like, well, if he ever becomes an All-American, let us know, which even if I did an All-American, I would have gotten a tryout.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, fast forward, end up doing pretty well in college, won Pac-12s twice, even won the finals of the tournament, the conference. I took on Tucker Knight in the finals, which is pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up beating him, and then I ended up becoming an All-American. And then right after that, talked to Jerry at the NCAA tournament, and he's like, we'll get you hooked up. Through the course of many emails back and forth through them, and the guy who's the head of talent relations is Kane Seaman. Many of you guys probably don't know that. You'll see him on Breaking Ground if you watch it. Talked to Canyon about getting a tryout, and then I end up getting the tryout in June of 2012. So I mean, man, that's almost 7 years ago. 7 years ago. So, ended up getting the tryout. What's funny, the tryout was during the same time as my college sports awards show. Like they call it the Bennies at Oregon State because the mascot's name is Benny the Beaver. So anyway, they call it the Bennies. And I won Male Athlete of the Year, but I was telling Larson it was kind of like one of those, it was like a rough year at the Oscars because the person I was competing against to win Athlete of the Year was myself versus the coxswain on the rowing team, the guy that just says stroke. Luckily I won, but I barely won because it was a voting system. I barely, maybe like a few, like 50 votes or something.
There's one popular
coxswain, one
yeah.
hell of an athlete.
Yeah.
So I didn't even get a chance to go to the award ceremony. So maybe they gave it to him, because I didn't show up. No, I won the award. But the tryout itself, though, I mean, I came from an amateur wrestling background, so not knowing what the tryout was going to entail, you just assume that it's going to be terrifying. And people go on other podcasts or whatever, shooting interviews, and they talk about, oh man, those tryouts are horrible, what you have to do, and this tryout wasn't at the Performance Center. This was at the FCW arena in Tampa. Mm-hmm. So I did this in Tampa where they had the two rings or whatever. It was hard, but keep in mind I was in great shape because it was just after the NCAA tournament. So I was in pretty good shape. So to me, it wasn't anything crazy. I did have one moment, well, not moment, but there was an incident where I did something that you're supposed to tuck your chin.
Yeah.
We're practicing when you go run to the corner post, you do an up and over, and then you land flat-footed, and then you do a back roll. I was trying to show off and be athletic, so I go do the up and over. Instead of landing on my feet flat, I land a little bit on my heels. So when I rolled back, the momentum took me and ended up slapping my head on the back of the canvas.
Oof.
And I kind of knocked myself out.
Oof.
Luckily it wasn't anything crazy. I didn't get a concussion, but I ended up doing the entire tryout with like the headgear the boxers wear.
Yeah.
So I was wearing that throughout the entire tryout after that. And then it kind of made me stand out because nobody else had to wear them. Mm. But what's funny now is when people do the tryouts now, sometimes they make it mandatory for some of the guys to wear the boxer headgear thing. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of funny. But anyway, there was a lot of like really notable people at the tryout, and this is what's really cool now, like reflecting back at it, because when you're in the Performance Center, you see who all gets signed, you don't really think how cool it is, and then you kind of look back and you're like, oh wow, this person was signed, this person was at the tryout, like a lot of who's who. So in my tryout, the guys that got signed that are still relatively known, so first off, you had myself, Angelo Dawkins of the Street Profits. You have Madman Fulton or Sawyer Fulton, who was Insanity. Now he's an OVE on Impact. You have some of you guys might remember Travis Tyler. He was there, but he goes by Dak Draper. He did a promotion in Missouri, and now he's in Baltimore working with the Ring of Honor guys. And then that was just our little quartet. Then you have the bigger name people like Sasha Banks. She was at the tryout. You have Scott Dawson. Sami Zayn. You have Jimmy Jacobs, who, obviously you guys remember he's part of Creative. He worked with Kevin Owens and the Jericho. He was kind of like one of the creative forces behind that thing now with Impact. Yeah. So he was there just trying out.
Yeah.
You have Sarah Del Rey, who's one of the coaches now. She's the assistant, actually the co-head coach at the Performance Center right now.
Mm-hmm.
So she goes from having a tryout to being the girls coach to the assistant coach down to like being the co-head coach.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty crazy.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, for them, then you have a couple other guys that made it that that didn't really. Like Matt Taven was there at the tryout. You have RJ City, who's awesome. That was at the tryout. You have Axel Keegan, who was made in the NXT, but he didn't really get a chance to do a whole lot due to an injury. That's a pretty good group right there. And then the guys helping at the tryout that you get, like Jason Jordan was helping out, showing stuff on what the tryout entailed. And then you had Victor of the Ascension, who was showing. He was just Rick Victor at the time, Space Lord.
Oh, this is pre-Ascension.
This is pre-Ascension. Yeah. So, pretty good signing group.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the bigger signing groups they've ever had. And it's funny because they would pair people up based on the location as far as like transportation-wise go. So, I got paired up with a Polish bodyguard named Marius. And he didn't speak really any English. And just hanging out with him, that was an experience. I can't really go into detail on some of the stuff we talked about, but he did a lot of security work for a lot of like really known celebrities, and it's just hilarious some of the stuff that he talked about and brought up. But anyway, it was the trial alone was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people dread it and whatnot, and then like the coaches at the tryout that were there was like Norman Smiley. You hear nothing but a lot of great things about Norman. All the work he does there. And then Joey Mercury, who used to, he was a producer for a long time, and now he's one of the coaches at Ring of Honor. Terry Taylor, who still has a pretty notable role there at the Performance Center. Who else? Bill DeMott was there, and Bill's a little infamous, but I don't have anything really bad to say about Bill. I think Bill's fine. Some people weren't worried about all that stuff, but like everyone's gonna have their own experiences with whatever coach, whether it's good or bad. Kind of just is. And then Dusty was there, and then he was obviously the one head of the promo class and all that. And there was a few other coaches. I can't really remember off the top of my head, but it was like a 3-day camp.
Okay.
3-day tryout. And it was I almost forgot another person that got signed, but he didn't get signed at that camp, but he was there regardless, is Elias. I can't believe I forgot about him. Yeah, Elias. That was the one I was thinking of. He was at that trial as well. So you have Sasha Banks, Elias, Scott Dawson, Sami Zayn. Like those are all 4 that are consistently on TV.
Yeah.
They're right now. So that's pretty big for as far as guys that make it to the main roster.
Mm-hmm.
So trial alone was just
like
tough.
What kind of you said it was 3 days. Without going into a ton of detail, what kind of drills were they having you run over the course of 3 days? Were they getting progressively harder per day to kind of?
It was like the first day is this is the stuff we want you to do. We want to see how well you can do this kind of stuff, like running the ropes. You run the ropes, see how many times you run the ropes, and then you run the ropes to somebody. You do drop down. Somebody just throws their body in front of you. You jump over, and then they do it again. Another drill is we call them regal rolls, where you have to do a shoulder roll, and then a lot of the cases you'll have another person in front of you. You both do the same kind of shoulder roll, and you pass each other. Then you get up, you recognize, you see each other, then you do another roll. Mm-hmm. So that's a timing thing, and that's the thing about pro wrestling. You have to have good timing. So that drill is supposed to teach you how to time things out. And then another one is where we call them I think get-ups or something, where you lay on your back and they blow the whistle and you get up and you get in your stance. And in pro wrestling, you have your left foot lead, and then you have your arm forward and your right arm back. We did a bunch of those, and we call them great squishers when you're in the corner and you're just doing high knees in the corner for a couple minutes.
All things that test coordination.
Test coordination and cardio.
And cardio, yeah.
And that's something that they look at is, are you coachable? Can you learn the things? And do you have a good personality? And can you at least take criticism?
Yeah.
Those are all things that they look at. And if you have a bad attitude, they're going to notice that, and they're most likely don't want you around unless you're a really big star and they need to sign you. So the camp, there's tons of horror stories about those tryouts and how sometimes they'll have 100 guys try out and they'll only sign one person. That wasn't really the case for me. Luckily, it wasn't like a giant camp, but we did get a lot of signees out of it. And obviously, you can see a lot of the people they signed actually made it to the main, and actually they have a pretty big role.
Yeah.
So, the last day was the promo class day, and pretty much it was we all come up there and like you monologue for a minute 30. And everyone kind of had their own thing. Some people got asked to come back up again to do skits. And it just fun stuff. Like tryouts at promo class are hit or miss with a lot of guys. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. I remember my promo, it's not too much different than what I'm doing now, except for I didn't really have, I don't have direction. I'm just, I pretty much said I was the man of myth, and that's stuff I talked about. I didn't really talk about my amateur wrestling stuff. I'm the mythical beast, or I said something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember after the promo, Dusty goes he said that what he said was okay, but you can see a lot of personality. So having personality was, I think that kind of got me over the hump, and I appreciate Dusty saying that. One of the funnier things is when Angelo Dawkins went and he didn't really have a whole lot to say. He kind of froze up. And then JR was like, well, hey, Dawkins, let's see, trying to get him to say something. And then Dawkins, the song by Sir Mix-a-Lot, I Like Big Butts?
Yeah.
Dawkins has his own version where he sang a song, I like big girls and I cannot lie. So he sang a different version of that as his promo. It was hilarious. It was awesome. And that got him signed, obviously. So, I mean, man, it worked differently for everybody. So eventually you find out months in advance and if you're going to get signed or not. I kind of knew right away that this was going to happen. I remember talking with Sammy and Jimmy Jacobs, and I think Sammy was like, I think you're going to get signed. And that was pretty cool that Sammy said that. And, sure enough, I did, and along with the other guys got signed, and that was pretty cool. And then from there, it's like, how do you get prepared? Because, I never went. I didn't have any pro wrestling experience before going to the Performance Center.
And how old are you right now at this time?
I was 23.
Okay.
So kind of at the right age to start learning how to do stuff. Because I lived in Oregon before that, so I'm moving from Oregon all the way to Florida. So I'm moving clearly across country.
3,000 plus miles.
Yeah. So you don't really get a heads up on what to expect because I've never been to pro wrestling school, and a lot of places do things similar to the Performance Center, and some places do a lot of things different. But at the time, this wasn't at the Performance Center. I should say this was at the FCW Arena in Tampa. So I show up January 26th. I didn't start going in the building until February 1st.
Okay. So about a week to acclimate.
So about a week after, just to get kind of acclimated, which is what they do with a lot of guys.
Yeah.
They'll move in and they'll give them some time to get everything straightened out. So by the time they go to the Performance Center, they have no distractions. Everything's settled in. You have your place. You're all set up. You get your week's pay so that you can find a decent apartment, get settled in.
Do they help you as far as finding housing, or is that just all up to you?
Some of it's up to you. I think what they do now is they send out brochures and handouts, apartment places that they recommend that people stay at. A lot of the guys, even you can watch the vignette with Velveteen Dream and EC3.
Yeah.
Baldwin Park's where a lot of the guys stay at. So they're all at Baldwin Park. That I know that pool from anywhere. They're at the Baldwin Park pool when they film that. So a lot of guys will stay in the same area. I remember I wasn't sure where I was going to live at. So I got this nice little apartment this is the thing. When I got there, the coaches there said, hey, whatever you get, make sure you're only got a 6-month lease because we're going from Tampa to Orlando. So I knew that as soon as I got signed was where I'm only going to be in Tampa for 6 months. Then we're moving everything in Tampa to this place in Orlando, and we don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
We've only heard a little bit. So they're still kind of looking for stuff in Orlando where we're going to stay at. And this is in early February. We were in training in Tampa at the Del Mabry Arena from pretty much February all the way to the end of June. And then once the end of June came, then we were transitioning from going to the Tampa Arena to the Performance Center that we see now.
Yeah.
So my first 6 months was it was different because the coaches would rotate training with certain guys. My first month, I had Norman Smiley as my trainer. And, man, Norman has so much patience, especially with guys that don't know anything. I spent a lot of my time with Norman just learning the basics of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard because in amateur wrestling, it feels weird when people have to guide you and move your body a certain way to position you. And that's what pro wrestling is. A lot of times guys have to move you, position you to set stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to let your body loose. And, a lot of the times you'll hear stories where someone's like, oh, that guy's stiff. Well, what a lot of the times they mean when they're stiff is that he's hard to move around. He's hard to position.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what stiff means. Other times stiff means if the guy hits you and he's hitting you hard, a little snug.
Yeah.
So I had a hard time acclimating to that. Some people can learn it faster than others. It's like it's a dance pretty much.
Yeah.
You have to learn to let someone guide you. I think that's another reason why I think a lot of the girl wrestlers do better is because they're able to let themselves go and be guided around faster.
Well, it's like CM Punk, when he was talking about doing MMA training, he had to unlearn that part of it.
Yeah.
He had to learn that he's not in there to protect his opponent in the ring and not to do that dance. He's in there to inflict pain on them.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So it took quite a bit of time for me to get acclimated to that. And that's the thing, like when you take someone who comes from I wouldn't say amateur wrestling's a combat sport, but it's similar. You take somebody who's used to having to control somebody against their will, and then when you go into pro wrestling, it's the total opposite. Everything that you learn, and that's why a lot of guys, if they ask me, should I get into amateur wrestling before I do, I'm like, yeah, I don't know, it's at your own discretion. If you want to, you can. If you don't, sure. Mm-hmm. It really doesn't matter, because it's not so much about the wrestling, it's about the performance, it's about your athleticism. And some sports can display that really well, and some sports that you think would help don't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really at anyone's discretion what they think, whatever fits them best. I mean, a lot of football players do really well because some of the training that goes in pro wrestling is similar to how they train for football players.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of gymnasts do really well. Like a lot of the girls that get signed are cheerleaders, and they're able to do it because they're able to memorize some of the stuff that they're told. You don't need to really memorize anything being an amateur wrestler. You just go out and do it. Same with any kind of martial art. Mm-hmm. But in pro wrestling, you do have to make sure that you follow the beats that you're given. So that was tough for me. And then also, we're transitioning from one building to another. So there were a lot of days where we have to move things in, move things out, and that took a lot of time. And the thing is, when you're the new guy and you have guys that, like they say, you pay their dues, they're guys that have been there for a while. They are used more as to produce shows and whatnot and to perform. When you not at that level yet, like me, I wasn't there yet. Obviously, my first couple months. So we were the guys that would have to tear down the ring, put the ring back up, load the ring in the truck, take the ring to the next place, unload it, put it together. That was kind of the job that I got stuck with a lot of the other guys. So that was kind of the role that we all took. I mean, when we had to put at Full Sail, it's the guys performing at Full Sail that you see are the ones that tear down the ring and put the ring away. They're the ones that have to put up the ring before the show. So whenever you see a Full Sail ring, it's the wrestlers that put it up, and it's the wrestlers that take it down, or the performers. So that's kind of something. So I did that a lot, was tearing the ring up and putting the ring down. Even when we went to the Performance Center, we moved from there. That was another thing. We had to put together those 7 big rings. It was me and a lot of the guys, the job squad guys, Now, obviously not like Bobby Roode or anything. He didn't have to do that. But you see myself, Mojo Rawley, I'll even say Baron Corbin, Enzo, Cass, Rusev, obviously Dawkins, Travis Tyler, Fulton, like pretty much a lot of those guys, we'd have to do a lot of the ring work stuff. But before all that, I'll go back to the training aspect. There are classes that we'd all be set into. You have your beginner's class, your intermediate class, and you have your super advanced class. I was in the beginner's class, obviously, because I didn't really know anything. Like I said, Norman was the coach there, and then they would rotate coaches. So one day I'd have Norman, and 1 month Norman. The next month I would have Ricky the Dragon Steamboat when he was coaching there, which is pretty awesome. Then him would go to Billy Gunn. Mm-hmm. Billy Gunn at one point was just like a guest coach. Then they made him full on 2A coach, and then it would go from Billy Gunn to Bill DeMott to Norman Smiley, and then kind of et cetera. That's kind of the rotation they did.
When for the in-ring courses, obviously there's the technical aspect of doing moves and executing them safely. At what point in that training do they start, or maybe it's concurrent with learning the moves, as far as the psychology of wrestling, telling the story with those moves? Is it all about getting the muscle memory down first of the moves so you can perform safely, and from there how you learn that language, and then how you put it together to create words and sentences and stories?
Yeah, that's the tough part for guys that have no experience. Like, there's key terms that they use in pro wrestling that, this is the hope, this is the high spot, this is the shine. Like, all those terms, I didn't know what that meant. And it's storytelling lingo. So when I'm there, it's just learning the moves for me. And I don't know when and where those moves would come in, but for me it's like a lot of cardio, which I don't really do much now because you don't really have to, because it's like your pace once you become a good enough storyteller. You know how fast to go, how fast not to go, so you don't blow up. But yeah, at that time it was just like learning the moves, doing the drills, being able to have someone guide you, being able to position yourself in the right spot so someone can hit the right move at the right place, right time. Mm-hmm. The story beat stuff, a lot of that is kind of on the wrestlers to learn that on their own. And I wouldn't say it's hard, but trainers kind of expect you to know what that stuff means. But I mean, especially because most of the people that get into pro wrestling, either especially if they get signed with NXT, they either had training before, or they were a really big fan. They know the terms. They know
the conventions and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So me, I didn't know anything. So that was a bit of a struggle for me, because like, man, I don't how do I put something together when I don't have the instructions? Mm-hmm. So that was tough because I didn't know the terms. I didn't know, it would take me a while to just think of how to put together a match. And a lot of that does come with experience and time, because like you were saying, do you have to learn the moves and get the muscle memory? Yes. They want you to be able to hit the certain moves like you're swimming. Like, you have to know how to do it.
Second nature, yeah.
Yeah, it has to turn second nature before it becomes anything. So I had to learn at least some stuff to at least be able to put a match together. Mm-hmm. But what I like what they're doing now is like they'll take athletes, and if they have a background in something, they will find a way to implement that background into their wrestling. I see a lot with guys that are there now. Like, they have an MMA background. Hey, let's use some of your MMA for moves. From back then at the FCW arena, they did not let us do that, because a lot of the time, there was word from the office that they don't want guys doing that. So it was tough to think of stuff to be original and creative when you're told, no, this is what we want you guys to do. This is how we want you guys to do it. And a lot of the guys up there are not willing to share stuff because they, everyone, it's a job. Nobody wants to give something to somebody that they could advance ahead of anybody else. And that was like kind of the competitive aspect of it. No one's going to share all their secrets. So asking for help was pretty tough. It took quite a few people to ask until eventually some of the guys gave me tips and whatnot. Yeah. But that's just kind of how it is, And then that's kind of the training. It was like 3 hours long, and a lot of it's a long warm up, a lot of stretching. That first hour, a lot of warm up, a lot of stretching, then a lot of cardio. Second hour is kind of pinpointing how to do a spot and how to do the spot and what's the spot, how to do moves. And then that would carry over to the third hour. So that was, and we were doing this, when we were in FCW, it wasn't as much training because we would go Monday would train, Tuesday we'd train, Wednesday was promo class day. So the entire Wednesday was dedicated to promo class day. Yeah. So we would come in, do a promo, and then we were done for the day. That was it. Not bad.
It's not a bad day at all.
Not a bad day at all. And it would be broken up into classes. You have your beginners class, you have your intermediate class, and then you have the advanced class. So pretty much it's like beginners, like guys trying to figure out their character, trying to figure out their personality, try to figure out what they can do as far as the mic goes.
Yeah.
Medium class is like guys that have character, but they don't have any direction with it, and they're trying to see where they can put the character and what kind of story they can have. Intermediate guys that are TV ready, they have their characters.
So it's polishing, essentially.
Just polishing it out. So for me, first year, I ain't going to be in the intermediate, and I'm not going to be in the advanced. So I was in the beginners class. Byron Saxton at the time was the one running the beginners class.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Byron that class, and then
was he still wrestling at that time?
No.
Okay.
He stopped and wanted to take more of a creative role. And
was he doing commentary then?
No, he wasn't doing that either.
He was working backstage.
Just being kind of Dusty's assistant.
Okay.
Then the intermediate class, Dusty came in, and Dusty's not going to show up at like 7 in the morning. He didn't need to. He didn't have to. But he would show up every now and then. So then we had the advanced class. And this is where like the stress would come in for a lot of guys, because there were guys that would come up with really great ideas. It was hard for a lot of guys to pitch ideas to them and get moved up to another class. That can be stressful. And then another thing that stresses people out is when you've been there in the beginner's class for a long time, and then somebody else comes in and they're there for maybe a couple months, then they get put to the intermediate class while you're still in the beginner's class. That drove guys nuts and bitter. And there was a lot of that going on. And they don't do that so much now. Now everyone's kind of put together
in classes. In his groups, huh?
Yeah, different groups, different timing. Like I think it's a lot different the way they do it now, which doesn't make guys feel resentful in the least bit. Geesh, being the beginners. And if you get hurt, they put you in the beginners class, because if you're hurt, they can't really write for you. You don't really have a character.
You're taking a slot in the class that you can't really do much for.
You can't really do much. You're taking a slot that's not really needed. So they put you in the beginners.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
I was going to ask in terms of the creative aspect. Let me backtrack a little bit as far as the technical training. We have heard throughout the years that there's a very particular WWE style.
Yeah.
At that time at SCW, do you think that was one of the pushing that particular approach to wrestling? Do you think that's one of the reasons why they were a lot more limiting in terms of giving talent the leeway to be more creative with their moveset?
I think so. Because I think then, because that was 2013, was when, so you have that 2013 time frame where I think, and I don't think the product was very good at that time, 2013. Nothing really stands out. I feel like then it's just, man, they were just big on characters. Character, not so much performances in the ring.
Yeah.
So they were, if you didn't have a character, they weren't going to use you. Which, it's like, how do you, and like, keep in mind, I'm not saying I was ready. I was not ready. I didn't have a character. Even I wasn't even ring ready. But this is just for me from looking from the outside looking in, how it went for a lot of guys. A lot of guys they didn't have stuff to get offered to them because they didn't have a character. But the style of wrestling, their approach, like the TV style, it's like, you hear it all the time. Slow down, take your time, use your facials, let things register. Make sure the crowd see it. Make sure that whatever you do is big so that the people in the top of the stands can see what you're doing. Now it's a lot faster pace. And I think that the reason why it's faster pace is because it keeps your attention more. Because if you look away, you're going to miss something big. And that was another thing. Well, don't do things fast because someone looks away. They're not going to be able to see it. When it's like we live in a world where everything has to be fast paced because our attention spans don't run as long. So the training then, from what I can remember, was just, like I said, it was a lot of cardio. It was a lot of learning the moves. And then in the advancer classes, it was more so same thing, cardio. Then they would run spots. They work drills. We call it the heat drill, where all you're doing is just throwing punches and kicks in the corner, checking your range, make sure you're not hurting anybody. And then from there, it was just – and then in the more advanced classes, they would just do a lot of practice matches.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. So that was my first 6 months, was just doing the beginner class stuff.
Oh, well, I got you there. As far as promo class, in the beginner class, tell me about some of the difficulties you encountered trying to, because we've spoken about it privately. The difficulties of trying to find your character.
Yes. A lot of the times you're being told, your character's this, your character's that, your character's yourself. It's an extension of yourself turned up to 11. I've heard that so many times from so many different people. I feel like a lot of guys have an idea of what their character is. And they have a character that they had in the indies, and that's the character they want to use. And then when they come here, they're like, this is my character. And then you'll hear someone say, well, we don't want to use that. We want you to do something else. Well, it's like, then why'd you sign me if you knew that this is what got me well known? And like, you want to change that now? And that happened with a lot of guys. It didn't happen with me. So I'm just speaking off of what I witnessed. Mm-hmm. So some guys would come in and have an idea of what they want to do. And they say, no, wipe that out. We're going to do something totally different with you. Some guys are such great wrestlers, but they don't have any character ideas. So a lot of the times, if the coaches know that they can perform the ring, they can do all that stuff, some coaches will assist to find some kind of character. And it's a process for some of those guys to find, me, man, I didn't know. I was just trying to learn wrestling, and, the character stuff to me, I thought would come later. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we all find our influences on what kind of character we want. Like Enzo Amore knew what he was going to be the moment he showed up, because he is a character.
Yeah.
So he knew what he was going to be when he showed up. Aiden English had a character before he showed up because it was something he was working on in the indies. He was being the thespian or whatever. Some guys like Sami Zayn didn't really have a character. Mm-mm. He just kind of came in and was Sammy.
He was known for his in-ring performance.
Yeah, his in-ring, as El Generico. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they can't have him be El Generico on the main roster, so he kind of had to show more of his own.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Before we start, we talked about the this is kind of moving forward in the discussion, but while you mentioned Sammy, I think it's interesting to talk about. El Generico is a pretty huge name in the independent scene.
Yeah.
2011, 2010, 2012, 2013,
Yeah.
And of course, in that phase of NXT, you got signed to NXT, you changed your name.
Yes.
There was basically no option to do anything otherwise.
Yeah.
Do you think now, assuming Sammy wanted to explore that character more, if he had gotten signed 4 years later, he would have even been given the option to stay as El Generico?
That's a good question. I think it really depends on what they have goals for, because I think if Sammy owned, I don't know if he ever owned the rights to the name El Generico.
I don't know if you were trademarked it.
If he ever trademarked it, if he did, there was a chance that he could have used that name.
Yeah,
and it was his product. I think because like for example, like you look at the Dudley Boys, you have Bubba Ray. He didn't own the rights to that name. WWE did. Mm-hmm. So on like Impact and Ring of Honor, he has to go by Bully Ray. Mm-hmm.
They're not the Dudley Boys. They're Team 3D.
Yeah, they're Team 3D.
Yeah.
So it for Jericho. Jericho owns the name. Mm-hmm. He bought the rights to it, so he can use that name wherever. A lot of guys don't really think about trademarking their names. They don't really ever think about using it. So it all really just depends. Like for instance, we watched Trevor Lee wrestle.
Yeah.
But he's not Trevor Lee anymore. He's Cameron Grimes. Mm-hmm. I think it's because I don't know, some other company owns the name.
I wonder too if like now it's a weird kind of gray area where you have someone of a certain level of renown, like Kushida. You have Kushida come in, he's not changing his name.
No.
But then you have some of the newer signees like Shane Strickland, like Trevor Lee, pretty much all the guys, Garza Jr., who, if you really have your ear to the ground in independent wrestling, you know who they are.
Yeah, exactly.
But haven't built up the brand, like Kushida or Matt Riddle or even Keith Lee.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. There's like a certain point that if you don't reach that name of brand recognition, they're like, oh, we got to change your name. And I wonder if it's just strictly because WWE owns that name now and then can use that name to make T-shirts and make all the money without having to pay you licensing fees.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if they think they can make more money off you by changing your name is getting changed.
Yeah.
But if your brand is such that it's strong enough that they can license it and make more money off it, that way that's what they'll do, essentially.
Yeah. Well, to segue off of that, it's like then it comes in the whole fact of how do you get your name in developmental. And sometimes it takes a week, sometimes it takes months.
Now, how involved are you as talents in getting the name?
So the coaches or creative will say, hey, we need to come up with a name for you. Can you go home and make a list of names that you feel most comfortably fits you? And then come back and we'll look at the names and we'll send it out to creative and then we'll kind of look at you and then we'll decide what name we think's best for you. So a lot of guys, what they'll do is they'll just try to think of names that they relate to, that they like, that they feel best fits them. Mm-hmm. So how I came up with Cal Bishop, and that was the name I got put with, but how that name even came up was, we're just kind of spitballing ideas with one of the trainers, and they say Cal, kind of like Cal Drogo would be kind of cool. So I said that's kind of interesting.
So I just thought you were from California. So
that's another thing. I think that's why they went with it, because I was from California, and I think they liked the idea of Cal. That's like Bailey. Bailey's from the Bay, so that's why her name became Bailey.
Oh my gosh, I just put that together.
Yep, that's why it's spelled the way it's spelled.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Bailey that's her name.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, little fact. She's from the Bay. Her name's Bailey. Yeah.
So once you have your name, is that enough of a catalyst to start thinking of? Oh, sorry, where'd the bishop come from? Too?
The bishop came from Alberto Del Rio's little brother Memo, because we were spitballing ideas, and I had a list of tons of random names. Nothing was really sticking, and Memo's like, "How about the name Bishop?" I'm like, "Bishop? You know, like the X-Men character, Bishop?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess I'll put it down."
Yeah.
And then what happens is once you find out that they have some names, you get to select which name you like.
Okay.
So I had 4 names, I think three names that came back. One name was Cal Carson, which just sounds like a NASCAR driver.
It does.
I'm like, yes, Cal Carson, which just to me I didn't like. Mm-mm. Then there's Cal Bishop, which it's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Then you have Biff Bishop, which I was almost half tempted to take the name Biff Bishop because it just sounds so funny. Then I think the other one I don't really remember. I want the name I pitched was Cletus Tahoe.
Oh, that's a great name.
Yeah,
that's a great name.
I wanted the name Cletus Tahoe.
That's so good.
I pitched that so many times. Cletus Tahoe, Cletus Tahoe, Cletus Tahoe. And they weren't taking it.
That's the name that sounds like the character is just right there.
Yeah. I kind of almost, when I came in the Indies, I almost thought about going as Cletus Tahoe. And the reason why the name Cletus even came up, because one of the coaches asked me, "What's your name?" And I said Clayton, because that's my real name. And they thought I said Cletus. So they just kept calling me Cletus. And I was like, okay. But then I think when they got to know my personality, they're like, oh, this guy's more West Coast. Mm-hmm. Cletus sounds too hillbilly.
Southern type thing, yeah.
So then they changed it. I think Cal is just, like you said, California.
Yeah.
That's kind of the reason why they picked that name, Cal. Just like Bailey. Why they picked Bailey? She's on the Bay. So I got paired with the name Cal Bishop, and I can barely even say it out loud without it sounding like I'm saying Cow Bishop. But yeah, when I first got that name, I got it that day that we have promo class, and we go into promo class, and Dusty's like, he asked me, "You got your name?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "What's your name?" I'm like, "It's Cal Bishop." He goes, "That's the worst name I've ever heard in my life." He hated it. So I didn't, I was like, well, great. Dusty doesn't like my name. And I kind of had no choice because of all the names. That name had stars around it.
Yeah.
And I think Bill DeMott liked that name, so he put stars on it, kind of like
drew some stars around it to kind of put a giant arrow around it.
Yeah, and Bill's like, all these names are good, but I'm just gonna say like
circle,
this
underline,
one the most.
Stars, 5 arrows leading
just
to
let
it.
you know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
So how long into your time you're still at FCW at this point, right?
Yeah.
How long have you been at FCW at this point before you get your name?
4 months.
Oh wow.
4 months. Yeah.
Okay.
4 months in, and some guys, they can pick up wrestling quickly, and then they get their name quickly, and then they throw them out there to have matches quickly. I would ask around, like, what's the time frame guys would get matches, and like having like a real match. I think Nate Everhart said within the first month and a half he had his first match.
Wow.
Because he picked it up really fast.
Yeah.
Some guys it would be a year.
Mm-hmm.
Some guys would be a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't even have a match.
Mm-hmm.
So I had practice matches. My first practice match was against Jody Christopherson, which is fitting now.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was Jesse White, who was Big Van Vader's kid.
Oh, okay.
And then I was tagging with Fulton.
Mm-hmm.
Then my second practice match, was against Rusev.
Oh wow.
I know, really funny. Rusev and I had a practice match. And then it was somebody else. But anyway, my first live event match, I'm jumping ahead here, but I'm just talking about when you have matches. My first live event match was me and Fulton tagging against CJ Parker, who's Juice Robinson, and Xavier Woods.
Wow.
So that's a pretty cool. And then, so we had a tag match against them, and, it's your first match. You never forget it. I remember leaving, obviously we're going to lose. Those guys are awesome. So we we lose, and we walk back to the back to where all the coaches were, and it was cool. We got a little round of applause, and they really supportive. And that's the thing. A lot of the guys that they signed at NXT and developmental, they end up signing they're all coachable. They're all great guys, just really cool people. And that's the thing when you're there. It's competitive, and like I said, not everyone's gonna kind of tell you how to do things and share tips and stuff because it's a business and it's competitive, but there are moments where people do get happy and excited for other people. But regardless, you have to be cool.
One thing that is seemingly self-evident now, based on various things you read and see, and it seems based on your experience in developmental, is that there's a really strong sense of community.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that people are fairly competitive because they're all trying to get spots in the main roster.
Yep.
But nonetheless, it almost kind of feels like a college atmosphere.
Exactly.
Where you're all you're all spending pretty much your entire days together, training, learning, and then once you're done there, you'll go hang out afterwards, grab beers.
Yeah.
Hang out, play video games, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. It's like being on a team. Like, best way to compare, it's like you're being on a football team. We all have spots. We all have our position in the show. We all, like, some guys they're the quarterback. Other guys are kind of lower level. They're on the kickoff team. So in that regard, it's like, where are you on the show is kind of your status. So in that, the whole goal is to go to any town in Florida or wherever, especially back then, that's where we were only traveling, having a great show, because if you have a great show, it creates buzz. Creating buzz means it's being talked about. When more people hear about it, more people want to see it and go to the next show. So that's the goal pretty much, is to have consistently great shows. And this is a time when they were hiring more guys that had an indie background.
Okay.
This is where they're getting more of the indie stars.
The Sami Zayns, the Kevin Owens,
yes,
the Finn Balor's.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you this quick question.
Yeah.
At what point Triple H wasn't in charge of FCW, right?
Not that time, no.
Okay. What do you know roughly when he kind of took the reins of NXT?
The moment NXT turned on.
Okay.
So before it was FCW.
Yeah.
Then WWE bought the rights to FCW, and then it was in that weird transitional period.
Yeah.
And then because everyone remembers NXT was that like competition show.
Yeah, it's like like a game show.
It was a game show.
Yeah.
So that was the whole idea of NXT. Triple H saw that, and he took it and he made it his own. Created NXT as its own brand. So the moment they started filming the NXT show, that's when he took over developmental.
Okay.
Which was probably a year It was probably that year I got signed.
So probably 2013,
Yeah, I think late 2012.
early 20. Okay.
Yeah, early 20, because the first NXT champ was Seth Rollins. So pretty much when Seth Rollins came in, that's when NXT started.
Yeah.
It's like the best way to put it. And then it was against, obviously, Jinder Mahal.
Yeah.
So it went. So that's the best way to put it. When NXT, pretty much when Seth Rollins got there, and then like a little bit, a little bit later, then it became NXT. So it wasn't that long after.
Okay.
And then, so anyway, we're talking about characters.
Oh, the indie guys coming in.
And the indie guys start coming in. That's when they start leaning more towards, because that first year was all character. They were signing guys that weren't exactly indie darlings, but they had the size, the look that fit the model for WWE. Eventually, it's like, well, the atmosphere of the indies were changing, where there was more hype starting to get behind it.
Yeah.
So there were bigger stars that were popular that were starting to pop up. So then that's when they start changing what they wanted to changing. We should not go so much for the look, but for the performances. So that's when they start signing more indie guys. And that at that point, you can kind of see a change in the creative to where instead of signing guys that had a little bit of experience, but they fit the look, they were writing more for the indie guys. So when you're a guy who just has no experience, coming from amateur wrestling background, whatever background before that, I know like Corbin and Mojo had a football background. You start to see you get moved around the card a little bit more because now they're starting to cater to the indie guys. And that could be kind of tough for somebody who's been at the Performance Center for a while. But it's different because the indie guys pay their dues a lot differently than, how some of the other guys do it. But a lot of moves that, we were learning, some of the stuff got taken away because, for instance, a regular body lock or the Bailey to belly move, that's a move that a lot of amateur wrestlers do. Once we found out that was her finisher, nobody was allowed to do it. So a lot of the stuff is you don't want to repeat spots and moves. I mean, it's totally different now because you see it happen all the time where people will repeat and do stuff. So as far as creative-wise, coming up with moves and ideas, that was hard for guys that came in with no experience.
Yeah.
Coming up with stuff is just, first off, you have no experience, so they're not going to teach you, and you can't really come up with it. So it's a slow burn to learn stuff, and that can get really frustrating. But I mean, eventually, when you do have an idea, and they will let you do it once you show it, and they really like it, it's a great feeling. That makes it really worthwhile. It's like, you've discovered something that you could use.
Yeah. Did they loosen up that aspect of it as the indie guys started coming in? Because
I think so.
I would think they were not going to tell Kevin Owens, you're not powerbombing people,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they definitely loosened that up because it's like, especially if you're an indie guy, you come in and you're known for certain stuff. If they take that away from you, they're not just taking away from you, they're taking away from your fan base that you have.
Yeah.
And that's something that they realized pretty quickly that you can't do.
Well, it's supposed to be Kevin and Sammy. They're both really creative in terms of what they do in the ring, what they can do in terms of being creative, and not in terms of just making moves, but putting moves together. I would think if they really kind of kneecapped them and say, no, you have to wrestle a very specific style, that's really setting them back before they even step in the ring.
Exactly. And obviously, they do have to do a certain style that's TV wrestling. But in that aspect, it taught them to, and Kevin and Sammy do great character work. They already had the wrestling. Then eventually they didn't have to focus on the wrestling. They just had to focus on the character work. And a lot of times that can either help your in-ring style or it can kind of take away from your in-ring style. I think with them it helped Kevin a lot.
Yeah.
Sammy's a little different scenario. I will say that they picked it up pretty quickly on turning their indie style into a TV style. And I learned TV style when I came in because that's what they teach you, how to do TV style wrestling. So when I had to go in the indies eventually, learning how to do the indie style, it's more freeing because you can do more. You don't have to rely too much on camera and stuff. But that was when I first came in. Now they're now with how much TV and camera they're implementing all the shows, Now guys are starting to do kind of both
Things are
the
starting
indie
to merge, yeah.
and they're starting to merge together.
When you were doing even the beginner's class as far as in-ring stuff, was any of the production aspect involved at that point at all?
No.
That probably wouldn't happen until you're starting
That
to
wasn't
rehearse
until
matches, right?
yeah. And then like that's like the production stuff didn't get big until we went to Orlando.
Okay.
So, and that's when a lot of things changed up again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty much you hit the reset. So you go 6 months kind of getting used to a certain lifestyle. And then that 5th month, we're just taking all the stuff out of this one place and putting it somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I want to go back to the character promo class real quick, just to kind of touch on. Promo class, like I said, there's 3 classes and whatnot. And pretty much what entails to happen in promo class is you show up, you come in with your own promo, your own thing, your own character, whatever. You have to go in front of everybody who's in that group, whether it's 10 to 12 to 15 people. You have a guy behind the camera, and then you'll have, at the time it was like Byron Saxton was the coach, and you pretty much go up there and you have like this black curtain behind you, and you have to do a promo, and you have to do a different promo. And if you don't have a character or direction, and you're just going up there trying to convey something for a minute to a minute 30, it's hard, especially when you don't know what your purpose is. And so it's like, do you talk about yourself? Do you make up a story? Do you act a skit out? Do you include somebody else in it? And some of the criticism you get, it's tough because delivery and promo is hard. Because you want it to make it sound believable, but you also have to make it sound entertaining. But you don't want to sound like you're over the top. Mm-hmm. But you don't want to sound like you're too under the top. It's like, how do you find your range? Some guys have a really damn hard time doing that because they've never done that before. Some of the indie guys never had to do promo stuff. They were too focused on the wrestling, how they get. So like you can get signed with having you could do really great training in the tryout, but you can have a really bad promo, but that's enough to get you signed. Yeah. You could be okay in the tryout, have a great promo, that can get you signed. I had a good promo because I didn't know what to expect. I just kind of winged it, the promo. My first day, I came in, I had to do promo class. I thought you just sit back and watch. That's what they do now. Oh. When you show up, you sit back, you watch. I had no promo planned, nothing. I just thought I was going to sit and watch. And then like get up and do like an intro and like say who I was. No, they made me do a promo. Oh, wow. It was horrible. Oh, I lost so much confidence in myself after that. Dusty was like, that wasn't very good. He said it in his own way, but it just horrible. Oof. And it just some, and that sucked. And that kind of pigeonholed me for a good while. I'm like, I wasn't going to move anywhere out of the classroom no matter what, just based on my own experience. But you got to have, and I tell guys all the time, like, practice talk in the mirror, talk to yourself. It might be weird. There's been times I'll walk around the house and someone might just show up and you just hear me rambling nonsense. And it's like, I'm just practicing a promo. You got to get used to it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of promo stuff that you'll see, and I was pointing this out earlier, it's like a lot of the stuff's in your eyes. How animated can you get your eyes? I know like right now just talking to you, my eyes aren't moving at all, but like when I have a camera in front of me, I'm in the mood and how to cut a promo. You cut a promo, you talk the way you talk. But you have to talk the way you talk to where it sounds believable. Mm-hmm. And you want to make sure that whatever story or message you're trying to convey, it's easy enough to understand, but it's not so easy to where it's just you're making it like cartoonishly obvious. Yeah. That's huge. Some guys can cut a really great promo and they like the character instantly, and that's enough just to get on TV with it. Mm-hmm. That's happened quite a few times. Their wrestling's okay enough to hold up, and then they could just put him on TV. I mean, I know Mojo Rawley got put on TV fast because he was great at promos. Mm-hmm. I mean, the stuff he's doing now doesn't really kind of show that, but Mojo has a lot of charisma, but he got put up really quickly because he had a great promo. Mm-hmm. It depends for everyone. Everyone's different on what they see and what they like. Yeah. And whatever you're conveying, if it fits you, if it's the way you wrestle, if it's your energy, if it's everything, then you have more opportunity to get matches and get work. Yeah. How long after you got your name did you start to
find the character of Cal Bishop?
I would say it still was a process.
Yeah.
Because, I always say this when I kind of regret not taking more theater classes in college so that I can find being more comfortable in front of a camera and talking. And for me, it just took a while. I came up with like Cowabunga Cal, which sounds like an 80s, really bad. And then other times I didn't really have one. I didn't really have a character in developmental. And then in Breaking Ground, you see me try to, I don't know what I was doing in Breaking Ground. Eventually, I was trying to do the mythical beast thing or something like that. And I just made up these really ridiculous claims, but just being just a out of whack crazy person. I had an idea similar to Grizzly Cow Jack, which is what I kind of do now. But a lot of that is, how do you talk? How do you convey whatever character you want to be? Mm-hmm. And the thing is, what I notice now is that it's easier to write for guys that are themselves and they don't show a crazy character.
Yeah.
I like seeing Ricochet not trying to be a character. He's just Ricochet.
Yeah.
He's just him.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's easier to write for someone you're just yourself. Like Alexa Bliss. She doesn't really have a character. She's just Alexa Bliss.
Yeah.
And they can find ways to write with her because when you don't have that one defining thing that pigeonholes you.
Oh, that one gimmick. Yeah.
That one gimmick, you can expand out and do more stuff.
Totally.
They had to change the way that Nikki Cross is. Because if Nikki Cross is crazy girl the whole time, they can't really write for her. Then they only have to put her in crazy, wacky angles.
All the time, yeah.
All the time. And it's like when Dean Ambrose or John Moxley talked about that, they thought that he is this one.
Vince was like, "Oh, you're super kooky."
You're
a quirky dude. Yeah.
So and that's the thing I've learned now in the Indies is I was going more of this mountain grizzly guy, but now the grizzly's more of a mascot.
Yeah.
My inner mascot. So
your spirit animal.
My spirit animal. Doesn't really convey who I am. Just it's part of what I wear. It's the attraction.
Yes.
So. As far as when I was there, I thought the whole time character was super important. Mm-hmm. It is, but now reflecting back, it's just be yourself, have a personality, and make sure your personality matches your style in the ring.
Yeah,
that's having those things is what will get you far.
Yeah,
like John Cena.
Yeah,
what's his character? He has this slogan, but more or less, he's John Cena.
He's John Cena. Yeah,
when you see The Rock in movies, it's The Rock. You just want to see The Rock as himself in movies.
And when you rock bottom somebody in Fast and Furious, you mark out.
Yeah, you mark out.
It's interesting that you were kind of there in not only the transition from FCW to NXT, but also the kind of idea of what NXT was going to be, going from a purely developmental program to being kind of something in between where there's a strictly developmental aspect, but then they're starting to bring in these indie names who just need probably a bit of polish.
Yeah, that's it.
Before their main roster ready. However, they're using a lot of those guys like Kevin Owens and especially Finn Balor to kind of be the guy in that promotion while they're developing other people around that. Did you have any experience kind of being involved in all that?
Yes. So the thing is, when they would sign those big indie name guys, they pretty much knew what role they were going to take because they have the experience. They already know what it's like to be in the main event. They know how to handle the pressure. They already have the moves. They already pretty established what their character is and whatnot. And obviously, those guys that are already super well known, Triple H is going to have a much more hands-on approach with them, like Kevin Owens, Finn Balor, Kenta. He's going to be more hands-on working with those guys. And then other guys are going to, they're going to work with the other creative people on what to write for, how they're going to write for them. And then pretty much when they write for everybody and they have an idea, you hope what they have in NXT they're going to take to the main. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't. Yeah, exactly. So I will say how they do things. And also what's interesting is when we went from Tampa to the new Performance Center, that's when they want to reset and say, this is NXT now. Mm-hmm. This is how we're doing things. I mean, like I said, dude, there's cameras all over the place. Totally different arena. 7 rings, a training facility, a medical facility, 2 recording areas. I just remember there's also another room that I was in there a lot when I got hurt my shoulder, a commentary room to work on watching matches and do commentary. You have the lounge area, the 2 locker rooms, and then there's another room to do film sessions with a coach and watch. So and then there was another group of students that came in too. So we had our FCW guys, including myself, and then like 20 more people came in.
Oh, wow.
So we went from having 50 guys, maybe 50-ish, 40-ish, to 70, 80.
Oh, wow.
And now it's at the point where it's 70, 80 to 100.
Wow.
100 guys are there learning how to do pro wrestling from everywhere.
That's crazy.
And they were just starting to implement other guys from other countries. Kind of right when I got hurt. Like there was guys from India, there's guys from China, Brazil, countries that don't really have a known pro wrestling outlet. So, but anyway, like I was saying a while back, the guys that don't really have a character, don't really have anything TV ready or whatever, still just trying to learn how to do a lockup. We were the guys that would get sent in to do all the when we should be learning how to wrestle. But regardless, we had to go set the rings up. We had to put the performance together. Like whenever I watch something, I see people on that ramp. I remember the day we put the ramp together. I remember it was Bill, it was us, some of the guys, some of the green kids, myself. We had to we obviously had a guy there to guide us, but putting those metal frames down, like it took a while, but we did it all as a group.
That's crazy.
So it's just funny. I'm like, oh, look at that ramp. I put that ramp together. Look at the weight room. They're throwing stuff around. I was part of that. I remember going in the truck and carrying the dumbbells and loading them up and putting the rack together. So I was part of all that early stage of the performance center, like getting all that shit together.
Yeah.
So, and then eventually you have the new students come in, and then that's another big reset, huge reset, because now we're working with other guys that just came in 6 months right after I got there. And I remember that group, you had Wesley Blake, you had Kalisto, Sammy Callahan, Simon Gotch, Becky Lynch, Alexa Bliss came in, but she came in before that. Who else? There's a few other people. There's quite a bit, actually. Well, there's that picture I showed you.
Yeah. That picture's great.
Yeah, there's a picture of like all of us together. If we did share it, we have to hide Kalisto's face.
Yeah.
Because his face is there right in the open. So you got to put like a little happy face or something over his head.
I'll just find a PNG of his mask and put it in.
Yeah, just put that over his head. Buddy Murphy.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a lot of like guys that are still relatively known.
The picture is crazy. It's basically a who's who.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy.
And most of the guys in the picture made it to Maine. That's what I really like to see. A lot of the guys that are in the picture. Yeah, Bull James was there as well.
Yeah.
It was Bull Dempsey at the time. Yeah, that picture's great. Like, I'm glad that they took that picture and like Norman made prints of it and gave it out. Cause
that's awesome.
You know, that might hopefully mean something someday. I don't know how many guys in there won a WWE title or anything in that picture. I don't think any.
Braun should have by now, but it hasn't happened.
I know, exactly. Oh, yeah, Braun Strowman was in that group, too.
Yeah, Enzo and Cass are in there, and Neville's in there.
Yep.
It's Sammy. Yeah, it's crazy.
That picture, that shows that was the first official class in the Performance Center. So that was cool to say I was part of that first initial group. And what I like about that picture, too, if we ever show it, you have me sitting right in the front.
Yeah. Yeah, you're sitting front and center.
Right in front and center. I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. I'm next to Mojo, and I have Kalisto without his mask on next to me. I have Sammy Callahan on my other side, and the ref Sean Bennett's right behind me. But yeah, who's who, man? Oh, yeah, I forgot Eva Marie was there, too.
Yeah. Well, in that picture, like Charlotte's there, Sasha, Bailey, who else?
Lana.
It is a who's who.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
We could probably go on and on. I mean, I think I have like a dozen questions left.
Yeah.
But
we could save it for another.
Exactly. We can do part 2 for sure. Well, Cal, thank you very much.
Yeah. And I'm glad that we were able to talk. I knew that's the thing. I was like, this is going to be like a 2 or 3 part thing.
Yeah, this could easily.
And we're only going my first year prior to my shoulder injury. If because it's a lot to cover.
Yeah.
It's not an hour conversation. It takes a few hours to
Definitely.
like hit all the main key points. But if you guys this weekend you're curious more about me, just go look up Breaking Ground.
Yes.
Just type Cal Bishop, CalBishop.
Yep.
And then you can
It'll
find
pop
the
up on
name
the
there.
network, and
It
he does-
should pop up.
And there's also 2 of his matches in NXT at Full Sail.
Yeah.
I show up.
Nothing crazy, nothing like a local or extra would have done.
You take a good bump in one of those.
I did.
You take a nasty bump. And you take on the Ascension, you're right.
Yeah.
As far as them in NXT.
They were great in NXT.
Yeah.
Ascension were so good in NXT.
Yeah.
And Victor and Connor are one of the 2 they're really nice people.
Yeah.
They're really great. So yeah, go watch it. Anyway, guys, follow me on Instagram too. KL_JAK. Just if you want us, because I have stuff from developmental there too, and then just stuff what I'm doing now, which is totally different what I was doing then. But anyway, yeah, it's Saturday. Got a match tonight.
You do?
They said I couldn't do it wrestling more because it's too injury prone. I'm fine, right? I'm here right now. Got a match.
How many years injury free?
4, I guess.
4?
4.
Okay, yeah.
And the shoulder injuries were back to back.
That's so weird.
Yeah, like
Most random things.
Same shoulder. It's just it wasn't at the time. It just wasn't ready, I guess.
Yeah.
And I remember Sami Zayn had not Sami Zayn, but Sami Callihan said this. He's like, Cal, could you imagine if you got let go after the first shoulder surgery without knowing? Because then like they paid for your second shoulder surgery like they did with the first. It could have been worse. And he had a good point when he said that, because you just never know with how the business is and how injuries happen. It's just a freak. But yeah, I've been injury free a lot, and you kind of learn that you have to do things your own way and at your own pace. And sometimes some guys just don't do well with having someone tell you how to do things, and obviously you have to learn that way, especially when you get into it. But after a certain time, you got to learn to be you and do yourself without someone telling you this is how you do things.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, thank you for having me for this show, Larson.
Thank you
this
so
was
much.
fun, and obviously we'll come back and finish up. The rest.
Definitely. There's like I said, there's at least 10 questions in my head that I want to ask.
Yeah.
We will at some point for sure.
Absolutely cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Have yourself a good weekend, and we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Be a part of Going In Raw today at patreon.com/Steve and Larson. Starting at $1 a month, you can enjoy Going In Raw ad-free, gain access to the daily 30-minute Going In Raw post show, exclusive merchandise, and so much more. Support Going In Raw today. Click the link in the description.